and welcome to the Quiet Riot, where we talk film, television, and media with an emphasis on older movies and nostalgic favorites. I'm Ainsley, and in today's video we are going to discuss 1963's The Pink Panther, a film that started a media franchise, though it didn't know exactly it was going to begin that way. The film was directed by Blake Edwards from a script by Edwards and Maurice Richlin. The cinematographer is Philip Lanthrope and editor Ralph E. Winters, with music by Henry Mancini, who had previously worked with Edwards before, and they continued to work with each other afterwards. It's hard to say what people think of when they hear the Pink Panther, because of course you get this idea of a Pink Panther, and we have the cartoon panther that was introduced to the film because Edwards thought that it would be a good idea to have a cartoon. And at the end of the day, he was right, because that cartoon ended up becoming a character in his own right. But what the creators and the crew originally thought was going to happen with this movie did not, and things took a far different turn than what was expected. If you haven't seen The Pink Panther and you want to, it is available on Prime and other streaming services that will be linked in the description box below. The film was initially conceived as a sophisticated comedy about a charming urban jewel thief, Sir Charles Linton. The film follows Linton, played by David Niven, as he travels to a ski resort to steal the famous Pink Panther diamond from Princess Dala, portrayed by Claudia Carnell. The fumbling inspector Jacques Clouseau, played by Peter Sellers, follows Linton to the ski resort along with his wife Simone, played by Capucine. As the focus geared towards Clouseau, the film quickly became his, and that was it. A franchise was born. They just didn't quite know it yet. Clouseau doesn't actually know that Linton is the Phantom. He just goes to this resort because he knows that's where the princess is, and he expects the Phantom to want this diamond, as it is the largest pink diamond in the world. Sellers was not cast in the role until filming was almost underway. Peter Ustinov was originally cast in the role before dropping out last minute. Ava Gardner was expected to play the wife of Clouseau, but dropped out, and this is allegedly why Ustinov decided to drop out as well. It is said that Gardner was not offered the role because of her erratic lifestyle, and that Ustinov's wife convinced him to drop out because she believed that that would affect the caliber of the movie. Gail Garnett dubbed Claudia Carnell's voice because she could not speak English. The Marx Brothers were initially going to sue Peter Ustinov for dropping out, as he did break the contract that they already had, but their lawyer actually said, "Can you prove any damages?" because by that time the film was already a major success. It was initially meant to be a vehicle for David Niven, who had hoped to star in multiple films as the Jewel Thief. Niven received star billing, and he was perfectly cast in this role, but it was Peter Sellers who stole the show and ran off with a franchise that would spawn a media empire. Henry Mancini, who did the music for this film, composed what would become one of the most well-known and loved themes in film history. Upon its release, the film's score reached number 8 in Billboard magazine's pop album chart. It was nominated for Grammy and Academy Awards, and was later inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame and selected by the American Film Institute as one of the greatest film scores. I honestly think that a big part of what made this movie even more special was the incredible score done by Henry Mancini, and the moment that you hear that Pink Panther theme, you know what you're gonna get. It's immediately recognizable, and it goes so perfectly with the atmosphere that this movie holds. Yves Saint Laurent did the costumes for this movie, and this was actually his first Hollywood film. He was getting really big in Paris, and it was time for his star to shine in Hollywood. There are differences in the overall tone of this film and the rest of the series. So Peter Sellers as Clouseau definitely is very clumsy, and he's a bit naive. He doesn't see everything that's going on around him. But in the following film, A Shot in the Dark, a lot more of the character that we know Clouseau to be comes out. The much thicker accent and his kind of inability to be criticized and realize that he may have said or done something wrong. That's not really present here, and I think this works a lot better for this movie because you have other characters who are in bigger roles. This was essentially, you know, David Niven is in the starring role here, or at least he's supposed to be, and the script didn't really go through many changes. It was just the way it ended up all working out in the end. And when you see the other movies, you can see how the character of Clouseau is really center stage and it's all around him, and that's what makes those work. It's even higher on the slapstick scale, and the entire world just kind of the kind of world just revolves around the oddity that is Inspector Jacques Clouseau, wherein the Pink Panther Clouseau exists in this greater world. In the director's commentary for the DVD, he tells the story of picking up Sellers from the airport and immediately bonding with him over their love of old comedians like Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd. By the end of the car ride, they had agreed to change the Clouseau character to incorporate slapstick. During the filming process, Blake Edwards would actually set up multiple cameras so they could catch him doing different improv falls and all of that, but apparently Edwards did actually have to set him up for a lot of the falls because he wasn't really good at physical comedy. It was all about more what's on his face and his expressions, which he gets from the person that he admires most, Laurel Hardy, or Stan Laurel of Laurel and Hardy fame. And so that bit of, there's the characteristics that are of slapstick, but who Edwards is as a person as well. He mentions in the Pink Panther story documentary that he had, up until that point, broken almost every bone in his body, and he's just somebody that ends up getting himself into those kind of situations like Clouseau does, particularly in this movie, where he's just always falling and tripping over things and dropping things. And so it's interesting to see kind of the different ways in which different people and different things were incorporated into the character of Jacques. Blake Edwards and Peter Sellers enjoyed working together to develop Clouseau down to every move and nuance of voice and expression. For years I'd been getting bits of what I wanted into films as a writer-director, but I had never had an area of which to exploit my ideas to the full. Then along came Peter, a walking storehouse of madness, a ham with an almost surrealist approach to the insanity of things, and we found an immediate affinity. Edwards had worked with director Leo McCarey early in his career, and he said McCarey had taught him an essential truth about comedy through his ability to extend tension in his comic scenes, past the point of which audiences became uncomfortable. He called it breaking the pain barrier, and this was something that Sellers really agreed upon, and they were able to really push the limits here. In an interview linked below, Edwards talked about Sellers' conversations with God. He would call him in the middle of the night and tell him about something God told him to do on set, and it didn't always go well. If they were on set and Sellers showed him something and he didn't want to do it, Sellers would then storm off the set. There is much talk about who Sellers was as a person and how he wasn't the easiest person to work with or live with. It's obvious that he was dealing with something and that he didn't have a lot of emotional intelligence, nor was he very well. He was a pretty ill person, and it's weird seeing him in these roles where he makes us laugh and knowing what was kind of happening behind the scenes. But a lot of the people who worked with him, particularly Edwards, is very honest about the good and the bad of working with Peter Sellers. Before filming began, Sellers suffered a heart attack. It's believed that this was caused by the extreme weight loss he had after going on an extreme diet and taking diet pills. He did this knowing that Wagner was going to be in the film, and he envied his good looks. First released in Italy on December 18th, 1963, the film would be released a few months later on March 19th, 1964 in the US. The film grossed $10.9 million in the US and Canada. It was positively reviewed by critics and loved by audiences. While presenting at the Oscars, David Niven asked that they not play the theme because the movie was not really his. That was not really my film. He would go on to portray a similar role in Murder by Death. Inspector Clouseau was not the only star born out of the Pink Panther. The Pink Panther cartoon has become one of the most recognizable cartoons, with a total of 4 animated series, 4 TV specials, and 124 shorts featuring the cartoon Pink Panther. Director Blake Edwards thought that having a cartoon in the credits would benefit the movie. The Panther was chosen from over 100 sketches and has gone on to become a character in his own right. There was also shorts done of the Inspector. If you haven't seen this movie already, as I had stated before, I will have everything in the description box below where you can go watch the movie, as well as anything that I may have watched or read in preparation for this video. If you haven't seen the movie and you don't want to be spoiled, stop now, go and watch it, and then come back to see if any of your thoughts are the same as mine and to learn a little bit more. According to David Niven's autobiography, The Moon's a Balloon, his private parts got frostbitten during the skiing scene, which was shot on an extremely cold day in the Italian Alps. He said that, reasoning that alcohol made you feel warm, he dripped the parts in a glass of whiskey. He said that it worked, but the pain was excruciating. So take that note, friends. Do not put your scrotum and everything in a glass of whiskey. In the bath scene with Capucine and Robert Wagner, an industrial strength foaming agent is used, which ended up burning both of the stars' skin. And Wagner, who was completely immersed at one point, became blind for a total of 4 weeks. According to Blake Edwards, the chase scene was an homage to a similar sequence in Foreign Correspondent by Hitchcock. Pink Panther could have been very different had Peter Sellers not become Inspector Clouseau, and it's hard to say if this movie would have had any sequels at all. Chances are the David Niven character of St. Charles of Saint. The David Niven character of Sir Charles Linton would have went on to make a couple more movies. He initially wanted this character to be very much a Nick Charles type, and it could have been him and Capucine or another partner of his own, and the media franchise would have been very different. That doesn't necessarily mean that there wouldn't have been the Pink Panther as he exists in this movie, but there wouldn't be probably as many sequels, because what really drew people to the character of Inspector Clouseau was how extreme he was, and he kind of brought that slapstick style back to the screen. Eventually, it didn't always work the way Blake Edwards and others wanted it to, but this franchise still went on to inspire a failed reboot that only made 2 films and starred Steve Martin, and there are also talks to create another reboot series. I believe they've been in talks with it since 2020, and it incorporates, I believe, both live action and some CGI with a Pink Panther cartoon. I have no idea. I haven't looked too much into it. I'm interested to see what they end up coming up with then, but it's important to note how no matter how anyone feels specifically about the Pink Panther released in 1963, that it did have an impact on the industry and that its impact is still seen today. The Pink Panther might not be as funny without Peter Sellers, but the movie is able to stand on its own apart from the specific comedic stylings of Sellers. He is the cherry on top of an already delicious cake. The existence of Niven's suave and debonair Sir Linton put opposite Wagner's more naive George, who wishes to follow in his uncle's footsteps, next to Sellers' clumsy Clouseau as to the specific brand of comedy in The Pink Panther. The women in the picture, the nice and naive Princess Dahlia and the loyal Simone, further balance out the film, and it wouldn't be the same without their characters that help bring us to the end of the film. The Pink Panther is a movie that's main goal is to entertain, and with the various skills brought to the set, the film became more than what it was initially intended to be. If Ustinov was in the role, the comedic style of the movie would not be present. It was the collaborative efforts of Edwards and Sellers that added the slapstick comedic style to the movie. If we had a different Clouseau, the movie might have been uneven. Clouseau is really the opposite of who Sir Charles Linton is. Linton is suave and debonair, he's very confident in himself and what he does, where I feel especially looking at the character of Clouseau as he is in this movie, he's someone who is very passionate about what he does and he has his own brand of confidence. But that, of course, changes as thing goes on. It's hard to kind of separate those once you are very aware of the existence of this character outside the original Pink Panther. But here he seems to almost have like a wool over his eyes where he sees what he wants to see, and that is certainly present. Everything is just magnified as things move farther into the franchise. And if you have seen this one and you haven't seen any of the rest, I highly recommend them. They're available on many streaming services as well. A Shot in the Dark was actually released a few months after this movie in the US, and it adds a lot more of the slapstick style comedy. It adds some more recurring characters who were present throughout the series and are an important part of the character. And unfortunately, Sellers, upon the release of that movie, didn't really like it, though Blake Edwards and others did. And like I've said, Sellers did not seem, and it is said that he was not easy to work with at all. The relationship between Blake Edwards and Peter Sellers was very tumultuous, and that was on set and off set. They actually didn't want to work together again after A Shot in the Dark, and there was a movie with Alan Arkin as Clouseau, and eventually he came back because they realized that they didn't want anyone else to play Clouseau except Peter Sellers. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch my little video. I really do appreciate it. I would appreciate it if you enjoyed this video to give it a like. It would really help me out. And subscribe and ring that bell to be notified every single time I post if you want to see more of me. Comment below with your thoughts on the movie and your feelings towards it. Is this your favorite of the Pink Panther franchise? If not, what is your favorite? I would really love to know. My personal favorite is A Shot in the Dark, though I do think this movie comes in a close second. They're just pretty different in style. I will be doing a deep dive into the entire media franchise in the future, but if you want to see me do A Shot in the Dark or any of the other films in the franchise on their own, please let me know in the comments below. If you have any suggestions or recommendations, things you would like to see on the channel, please let me know, and I'll see you later. Bye!